This is the Life Sciences Leadership Show. I'm your host, Michael Piperno, and I'm a leadership communication coach and facilitator who specializes in the life sciences industry. On each episode of this show, I interview industry leaders from organizations of all sizes about their leadership journeys. My goal for the show is to help you gain leadership insights and knowledge that'll help you in your own life sciences leadership journey. Okay, on with the show. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the show today. I'm so happy to have Marianne Gill, who is Vice President, Medical Affairs, Infusion Solutions from BD. And Marianne and I have known each other quite a long time, and we've had a lot of conversations about so many different aspects of leadership, especially in the life sciences field. And I wanted to have her on the show today because we've been talking a lot lately about how you inspire high-performing teams. So, Marianne, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Michael, thank you so much for inviting me. It's truly a pleasure.
I'm so glad you agreed to do this and let me record one of our conversations. So that's awesome. So let's start, Marianne, by helping people get to know you a little bit better. Tell us about, not just the brief overview of your leadership journey, where you started, where you're at today, and how you ended up there.
I started my career journey as a registered nurse in the 80s as a critical care nurse. And I did that for several years and decided that I wanted to branch out into home care. And I specialized in IV therapy, administering IV therapy to patients in the home. Did that for a few years as well, and then decided to transition into industry. And I was lucky enough to get a job with, it's now BD, but formerly IMED, and they were a leader in infusion therapy for acute care patients who are in hospitals. So I have been with that company for almost 40 years now, through several transitions of ownership. And I'm very proud that I have been able to kind of stick with a company that I really feel that its products and solutions make medication administration safer for patients and our and our users who are clinicians. So currently I am the Medical Affairs Vice President for Infusion Solutions with BD, and my journey through my career transitions at BD have been all customer and patient support in nature. And that in itself has been truly an honor to be able to understand customer needs, patient needs, and how we can manage our clinical and technical teams to make infusion devices and medical equipment in general safer.
It's funny. I hadn't realized you've been at basically the same company in all of its iterations for that long. And what's been something like, I'm hearing the passion from you about what you love and what you like to do and why you do it, but is that what has kept you in the same company? I know we've talked in the past, you've been through some transitions and acquisitions and all of that stuff. Basically what I'm saying, Marianne, is it's rare to be at a company that long. So there must be some passion going on or something. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Michael, exactly. And, it's not easy going through mergers and acquisitions. My company has been, sold, bought several times. And I do say that I'm fortunate enough to have been able to get through those transitions. A lot of luck, right? But I also think that I really felt that what I do, what my teams have done are important, right, to healthcare, to safe medication practices. And I think keeping that core value that I have as a nurse, someone who took care of patients for a long time, someone who was a care provider for a long time, keeping with that core value, it makes you want to stay with a company through the hard times. And, there were a lot of hard times.
I'm sure. I mean, I went through, in my earlier career, did I go through two? No, one merger. And it wasn't good. I mean, it was literally 9 months later, all the people who were good were gone. And you know what, Marianne, I think it wasn't that the company that was taking over wasn't good. They were actually great. They were much bigger than us. They were more established. The communication during the transition was horrendous. And there was so much uncertainty that people didn't think they were safe without acting and moving on.
That's exactly right.
What are some of the things that you would say in those transitions that were either something you did or something leadership did that was good and helpful and made that transition
Hmm.
go smoothly, or something that you learned that wasn't good? Anything come to mind there?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, and I know you're very familiar with this, the clashes of culture when
Yeah.
companies merge, right? They're culture clashes. And when we made the first merger with another company who was a competitor of ours at the time, right?
Right.
We were competitors for years, and then we were all of a sudden part of the
You're
same
right.
company,
That is kind of
right?
unfunny, right? Yeah.
It's not fun. And so our leader at the time identified that it was our culture that was keeping us from moving forward. And we started a transition of corporate culture and how to be a new culture, not the culture from
Mm.
my company and the other company. It was how do we form a new culture? And that's what I know helped us move forward and became even more successful as one.
I'm sure, because that's naming that there's an issue here, and it's naming that there are so many differences, and it's an agreement to have a vision for the future rather than just setting back and letting all the difficulties continue and fester.
That's
So
right.
smart.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's right. Hard to do, I would think, but smart to do something
We,
like that.
and I was again fortunate enough to be one of the culture trainers, right? We worked with a company who helped us develop a culture that we wanted to teach. And I think we trained probably about 10,000 people
Wow.
worldwide on the new culture. Now, this was almost 20 years ago, right? And I still to this day use those tools.
Yeah.
And one of the tools that you had mentioned already is communication,
Right.
trust,
Yeah.
a passion for your core values. Even 20 years later, they still resonate with me.
Isn't that amazing how those kind of points in your career, like you
Yeah.
take them and you run with them and they help you for years and years to come? That's one of the things, Marianne, that I always tell people I love so much about my work, is because when I'm brought in to train a team, whether it's presence,
Hmm.
leadership skills, internal communication, conflict, whatever it is, I get told and I know that the skills that they're learning from me and that we're going to reinforce during the time that we're together, which won't be forever, are skills that are going to serve them for the rest of their career. And that's super fulfilling for me.
And personally as well, right?
Yeah.
These are skills that are personal and professional. And they're also skills that just not leaders need to do. Like
Right.
leaders demonstrate them, shadow them, to the folks that report to them, right, that they lead. But they're also skills that you can use cross-functionally. You can use them with your peers. You can use them with leadership. They're useful across the board, and I find that I'm using them all the time.
You and I have talked outside of this podcast about like the elements of having a high performing team. And when you think about a high performing team, of course, it's teams that are getting results and working well together and supporting the mission of and the vision of the company and all of that. But there's also the aspect of teams that where you retain people, where people want to
Yeah.
stay, where trust level is high. So, what are some of the things that you've found in your leadership journey? Because I know from talking to you that you've led teams and that you have pretty cohesive, high performing teams throughout your journey. What are some of the things that you would say to a leader are must haves if you truly want to have that culture? The culture you want to have, plus have a team that performs at the level that their potential of.
Oh, that's a great question. So there's a lot there, right? How do you form a high performing team, right?
Yep.
Once you form it, that's forming, storming, norming, that
Right.
whole, I love that, I love that process, right? To get to
Right.
a high performing team. Once you form it, how do you keep them?
Right.
How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them challenged? How do you keep them passionate about what they do? And how do you keep them being open and honest about what they need, right?
Right.
And I think it starts right with that clear vision of what we need to do,
Right.
common vision, common goals.
Right.
Everybody needs to be real clear, right, about what we're trying to accomplish. And the team itself, right, needs to be diverse. That's commonplace now. It needs to be diverse.
Right.
And they need to feel safe,
Yeah.
right? They need to feel safe in speaking up. They need to feel like they're heard. I would say that those are the first things that pop into my head when you asked that question.
Yeah. Well, psychological safety and feeling safe and being able to speak up is like, for me, is number one. And that
Mm,
comes from, in my experience, that's making people feel heard, truly
hmm.
being a good listener, showing care for the well-being of people, but then also knowing that they can trust each other. There was a guest on this show a couple
Yes.
episodes ago, and we talked about how when you have a high trust culture, people aren't as afraid to make a mistake. Number one,
Hmm.
they're also
Hmm.
they're not a, they're less afraid to say I don't know, or this is
Hmm.
what I know right now, or they're also more likely to challenge each other in a respectful way because that trust level is high. But how do you get that trust level to be high? And I know leaders who struggle with it a lot. And it's usually, I'm finding, not necessarily, well, it is forming, it is having the right people on the team, but it's also making people feel like it's okay to not have all the answers, to need help, and to make a mistake, I guess is what I'm kind of,
Yeah.
is kind of the crux of it, you know?
And goodness knows, I make mistakes, right? Everybody does. And I also feel that in order for people to trust its members and their leader, they need to get to know you, right?
Right.
I have always led from a place of, I think, compassion.
Mm-hmm.
I truly care about the associates. They know me, right? They don't
Right.
just know my work side, they know my personal side. I know their personal side. So it you really do create a sense of family, that your team truly enjoys being with each other personally and professionally. Now that's hard to do. And does it always have to be like that? No, right? Sometimes you just can't get everybody to get along just great and know each other's spouses and children. That's
Right.
difficult to do, especially in remote situations now, right? But
Right.
I guess the bottom line for me is you have to establish an environment of community, of trust, of listening and empathy. And we're all nurses and pharmacists.
Mm-hmm.
That might come a little bit more natural to us. We're typically emotional and passionate
Right.
human beings to
Right.
begin with, but not all teams are like that. Some teams have very technical people on them and very analytical people on them. So how do you do that, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a challenge. I mean, a lot of the clients that I work with, it's a super mix of different educational backgrounds, cultures, levels of experience.
Yeah.
People who are on the marketing side, but people who are also on the scientific side, and it's definitely it's harder to do when your team is so different like that, but it is possible if you're willing to be the leader who does the work to help each other understand each other.
That is so true. In fact, now, right, the cross-functional team dynamic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
one team can't do it all. You
Right.
need those disciplines of, like you said, marketing, research and development,
Right.
quality,
Yeah.
regulatory. I mean, you want to talk about all coming from a different perspective, right? Even
Right.
though you're part of the same mission and goal,
Right.
safe patient care, for example,
Right.
for me, everyone has different, pieces of that pie that they need to accomplish. And how, especially when you're developing products,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're selling products, when you're supporting products, what is important in each of those functions that you need to get right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that one thing? And
Right.
Michael, do you think it's communication?
Well, I mean, I think that's a lot of it. I think a lot of the breakdowns that I see in so many organizations is tied to communication. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it can be the fact that communication isn't happening. That can be
Mm-hmm.
a problem, but it
Mm-hmm.
could also be that, well, actually not also be, I know it's quite often that people aren't thinking about the audience they're communicating with and
Mm.
how they may be different and meeting them where they are. So you just named all of those different areas, R&D, regulatory, maybe it's CMC, maybe it's technology, da 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 da. They all, like you said, are coming to it with their goals and their agendas. But very often what I see, especially in life sciences with the people that I help, is that they're talking to or telling the story or delivering the data to that other brain, very different brain
Mm.
in the same way they would to their colleague. And that's not going to land well because it's not considering where the other human is outside of your little bubble of people who get you.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And a
I
lot of
do.
times a lot of my clients bring me in for presentation coaching, skills coaching to begin with. And that's where the aha moment often goes off with them is, they're presenting and I give them feedback on I get most things in pharma and life sciences, but if I'm confused at what the point of this slide is or the point that you're making is, that's a problem. I don't have to know all your data, but if I can't
Right.
follow you,
Right.
that's a problem.
Right. Well,
So,
and that's relevant for high functioning teams as well, right? If, you can have a high functioning team, let's just say in medical affairs, right?
right,
And there's a high functioning team maybe in regulatory, but if they can't communicate effectively and get on the
right.
same page, that's not easy to do.
It's not easy to do. And a lot of times what it comes down to is not necessarily the actual communication, but the fact that they're not honoring each other's objectives
Yep.
and needs.
Yep.
So, because when you do that, even though you may not agree, if you make the other person feel heard and consider their perspective and be curious about where they're coming from, it just makes the interactions go so much more smoothly.
I agree. I agree.
So,
And I know that, first of all, leaders struggle with this, right? And you see it even in leadership meetings, that getting on the same page with people, trying to understand where they're coming from. Not being afraid to respectfully challenge, ask questions, right?
right,
And I think the other piece of team dynamics is, come with solutions,
yeah,
right? Don't be afraid to provide feedback, but
right,
come with solutions as well.
right. Yeah, well, and that's you and I have discussed this probably several times in the past, and it goes down with that. It goes right down to that safety and trust thing. Is that if the environment is safe and respectful and collegial, people will take the risk of bringing up a solution that might not be the perfectly formed solution, but it's the seed of a good idea. And if they're afraid to bring it up, what could have been a great idea never sees the light of day. And that could have been the solution.
And Michael, this is another one of my favorite topic and sessions when you're with teams. And this is an old thing, right? This is not new, but brainstorming. When you're trying to solve a problem, a complex problem, and you put people in a room and you have trust, right? You have compassion, they feel safe. Brainstorming is amazing because that one little seed that someone says, no matter how far-fetched, there's no stupid idea, right?
Right.
I have seen problems being solved in brainstorming sessions. Like, I still can't believe how they happen, how amazing they are.
I love it.
Because of, everything that we just said.
Yeah. I love I absolutely love that because I remember from my agency days when I had my agency, I would put really smart, creative people in a room, and I would go in, I'm a self-confident guy. I would go in with okay, I think I know what the idea could be, or I've got a good idea and everything. And I would sit back and, I would just let those people do their work without any boundaries, knowing that, we're going to hear some things that probably I can't afford as an agency to do or would never happen, but let it flow, let it flow.
Right.
And Marianne, what these people would come up with, and I'm like, this is why I love collaborating and talking things out with people, because I never would have thought that would have been it. Never.
I am very fortunate to experience that a lot.
Yeah.
It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. And, you said brainstorming, but what came into my mind when you were saying that to me and the value of that, it made me also think of when I do workshops with teams who are good teams, and I force them to, not force them, but I facilitate them talking about their core values and their strengths, which are a big part of leadership presence. And it's so beautiful because they've never talked about that with each other. They've never talked about how different everybody is in the room. And then the conversations, it's not like brainstorming, but I guess it's just relationship building, which I think brainstorming does as well. But it just opens the door to thinking differently, I guess, or being more self-aware and situation aware and all that kind of stuff. It's just cool. I love when that happens, and I love facilitating that. Is there a leader or something that has inspired you along your leadership journey that kind of has, I don't know, like trademarked your leadership style, or kind of like what's your North Star in leadership? Was there someone who demonstrated something to you, or is there just a principle or something that drives you in leadership?
So two answers. I would say there have been some of my colleagues, right, that I always notice. I'm not just saying this because this is your, you know,
Right.
this is your livelihood,
It's
but
my, yeah.
how they communicate to large masses of people. You know, how they take a very complex situation and be able to very clearly, personally, even informally communicate to people in a way that they can connect and they feel very satisfied with the information. That is really hard to do, right? Especially with complex issues.
Yeah.
That a communicator can explain things in a concise manner that resonates with people. I
Yeah.
tend to gravitate to those types of leaders.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, because they're inspiring and they're authentic. Like, yes, they
Hmm.
did work hard to do that
Hmm.
and were very intentional about that.
Yep.
But I think I'm hearing from you something that, I talk about a lot, is that anybody can spew data, anybody can say words, anybody can present, but it's the speakers and the leaders that make you feel something, that
Hmm.
really influence, cause change, have impact.
And that type of person, it's the kind of person that I find myself hanging on every word. When you're trying to communicate something that's important, you have to hang on every word. Every sentence should be meaningful. And that's the type of communicator that I tend to gravitate toward.
Yeah,
So that's
sure.
part one
Okay.
of my answer to your question.
Right.
I would say part two as a leader is, and I know that we've talked about this in the past, leaders can lead teams, even if they're not subject matter experts about the team they're leading, right? And I had that experience. I had the opportunity to lead a team of technical subject matter experts, clinicians, engineers, for products for which I didn't even know how to turn the products on, right?
Right. Right.
And I thought, okay, so how am I going to lead a team when I don't even know how to use these products? And it took me a while, but they don't need my subject matter expertise. They need me to help them do their job to the
Yeah.
best of their ability, to take down barriers, to make sure that
Right.
they're heard, to give them resources that they need.
Right.
That's the kind of leader that I became, only because
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything else, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. But that's so valuable to them because that's what they needed.
That's what
They
they
didn't
needed.
need you to tell them, they didn't need you to oversee and micromanage their
They,
expertise. They needed all those things that you just said.
it's
So,
exactly right.
yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Michael, in a team like that, right? When you're a leader for a team that you're not the subject matter expert,
Right.
you can't roll up I love to roll up my sleeves and get
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
involved, right? Which I am able to do now, but at that time, I couldn't. So, out of all those members of the team, who needed what?
Right.
People need different things,
Right.
right? In order to feel that they're doing their job well, in order to feel essential in their
Right.
role.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Back to your, I want to go back to you. You started your career as a nurse and everything, and you've said a couple things today that kind of resonated from that experience. Is there anything specific from those days in that kind of setting and that training that you still lean on to this day in the work that you do?
Well, patient care,
Yeah.
the importance of being able to administer safe, high quality patient care.
Yeah. Yep.
And I tell everybody do whatever you can to stay out of a hospital.
Yeah. Right.
But one of these days we're all going to need healthcare, right?
Right.
And I'm part of a company that designs medical products,
Right.
and they have to be safe. They have to be effective. They have to be easy to use, intuitive.
Sure.
I mean, we need to continuously provide support for the users, which in
Right.
our case are nurses, pharmacists, physicians, so that they could administer safe patient care. I think that, Michael, that has driven me for many, many years, and it continues to.
Great. Yeah. What would you so a lot of different types of people that listen to the show, all the way from the
Mm.
C-suite down to people who are kind of it's getting started on their leadership journey. What advice would you give either emerging leaders or existing leaders who really want to inspire excellence in their team? What's comes to mind, one or two things from your experience that is essential for them to do?
I would say the first thing is to be a leader of a team for the right reasons.
Tell me more about that. Yeah.
When you sign up, when you want to get promoted to be a leader, and they're not just managers anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
These folks are leaders, they're mentors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're doing it for the right reason. You can't do it. I don't believe the right reasons are to climb the corporate ladder, right?
Right.
When you sign up to lead teams, you're taking on the responsibility of ensuring that your employees grow
Mm-hmm.
and feel supported. That's the job.
Yeah. Yep.
I
And
think
lead.
that's first and foremost.
Yeah. And leading people is hard work. It's not easy work. Leading people is hard work. And I think I've seen a lot of leaders who've been elevated to leadership positions because of their expertise and their brilliance and their knowledge, who haven't been equipped and really ready with what comes with leading people. So, and personalities.
And I got my master's degree in health administration and leadership, right? And one thing that I came across at the time was that the concept of servant leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it really resonated with me. And I was lucky enough to have a leader at my company a while back who was a true servant leader.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look that up and see all the characteristics of a servant leader, that was something that I realized I was doing some of it. But I think that especially when you're working with healthcare professionals
Mm-hmm.
who have a passion about, patients, et cetera, that servant leadership, I think, is important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Marianne, we're reaching the end of our time here. See, I told you it went quickly, didn't it?
It really went quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we had a really good conversation. Hopefully, the things that we've talked about will help one or more of my listeners along their leadership journey. So listen, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It was my pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening to the show today. If you enjoyed it, please rate it on your favorite podcast platform and tell one colleague or friend about it. Thanks. We'll see you next time. The Life Sciences Leadership Show is brought to you by the Comvia Group, experts in leadership communication coaching and training for life sciences leaders. Learn more at www.wearecomvia.com. That's WEARE, Comvia, COMVIA.com.